This is a video on casting vision and creating value for the importance of focusing on the guests that come your way each weekend. At our church, we call these values our plumb lines, short, sticky phrases that communicate bigger truths to our leaders and our volunteers. And our primary plumb line for our guest services team is this: the gospel is offensive, but nothing else should be. I think you'd agree with me that we live in a culture where getting offended has almost become an Olympic sport. We reinterpret and reimagine everything through the lens of how someone else was out to get us, or someone was attacking the core values that make up our lives. We get offended over matters of politics and matters of religion and matters of entertainment. And if we're honest, as Christians, we don't always do a good job of believing the best about others and checking some of those offenses at the door. The fact is, a lot of us live in a Christian bubble. We only listen to Christian radio, we send our kids to Christian schools, and we only shop at stores where the owner has a little sanctified Christian fish on his business card. That's why it's important to step back from time to time and think about what we're saying at our churches every weekend. If you're a part of a church that presents the full gospel, then you're not presenting an "I'm okay, you're okay" message. You're presenting a message that says, in effect, I'm a wicked sinner who was rescued by Jesus, and unless he rescues you, you'll split hell wide open. Now, that is not very touchy-feely in our society. As a matter of fact, it's downright offensive. Paul noted that offense in 1 Corinthians 1:18, where he says that the word of the cross is folly, it's foolishness to those who are perishing. But to those of us who are being saved, it is the power of God. A lot of churches have chosen to reply to that offense by watering down the message. Rather than talk about sin, they talk about shortcomings and character flaws. Rather than presenting Jesus as the truer and better anything, they present 12 keys to a better you. The seeker movement has produced quite a few good conversation points that I would completely agree with. But one of the key problems and one of the shortcomings is that it's robbed the gospel of its power in many cases. Flashy programs and sparkly Sundays are only going to last us so long. As Mark Dever says, what you win them with is what you win them to. There's a balance between seeker-driven attractional services and a more reformed, fundamental style of weekend planning. I don't believe you have to choose between "I'm okay, you're okay" and checking the length of sinners' hymnlines as they come through the door. That's why we say that though the gospel offends, nothing else should. By the time a guest gets to the seat and listens to the message being preached, we should have done everything possible to pave the way with rose petals and puppy fur. In other words, we should take the biblical virtue of hospitality and put it together at an institutional level. For your church, that may mean a parking team that attempts to place people in the same zip code as the service they're attending. It may mean a welcome center that's staffed with our very best greeters to act as advocates for the guest. It definitely means a team that is trained to anticipate and design and respond to every part of the guest experience. It may mean a cup of hot coffee and a granola bar. It means an eye-catching, warm and friendly kids area so that parents don't feel like they're dropping their kids off to gray cinder block walls and flannel graphs. Some would argue that this caters to, or even worse, creates, a me-centered vibe within the church. But move that from a corporate to a personal level, and you'll see that this argument just doesn't wash. God's not glorified in your personal hospitality when you invite someone to your home but give them poor directions, a cold fast food meal, and a half-hearted conversation. You would never treat a guest in your home that way. Why on earth would you treat a guest at your church that way? In his book, Center Church, Tim Keller says it this way: evangelistic worship is not avoiding the bold proclamation of the truth. Rather, it is leading with the offense of the gospel instead of with the truths that are predicated on the gospel. Now, to be very clear, I believe that guest services within the church are a big deal. They're a really big deal, but they're not the deal. If a guest experience begins and ends with hospitality, then as leaders, we've missed the point. It has to lead somewhere. It has to be a catalyst, something that moves people from here to there. It has to be the front door for the gospel. The hospitality of a church can adorn the gospel and encourage faith. And on the flip side, a cold and unfriendly church contradicts the gospel message. So pastors, continue to preach the unfiltered gospel. Run the risk of offending people with their sin and shocking them with the unending love of Jesus. But as a church, equip your people to set the table in such a way so that nothing else offends your guests. Seek to create the kind of environment where your guests will say, I don't necessarily agree with everything that I heard, but I certainly can't argue with how I was treated. That environment will eventually turn cold hearts warm and lead people to the gospel.